Right now, Belarus and Russia are really good friends, but in 5 years, things between them might start to get complicated. This is because Russia has a big plan. A secret document from Vladimir Putin's office was leaked, showing that by 2030, Russia plans to betray Belarus and take over the government, military, schools, and economy. This is a very bold move by Russia. But why does Russia want to change its good relationship with Belarus? Since the war with Ukraine began, Vladimir Putin has been losing friends because of his unsuccessful policies and big ambitions. In just over a year, Putin has damaged Russia's economy, pushed some of its neighbors to join NATO, and made the world less afraid of the Russian military. This happened as everyone watched the war on TV and saw Russia struggle to win against a much smaller Ukraine. These mistakes have made other countries wary of Putin. Instead of understanding why, Putin has blamed his advisors, leading to over 30 Russian leaders and rich people either disappearing or dying under mysterious conditions since the war started. With all this trouble, Putin's close friends are getting worried, leaving him with very few people he can trust. In this situation, Belarus, Russia's neighbor and close ally, should be very careful of Putin's plans. Belarus is located to the west of Russia near Ukraine and is about the size of Kansas with a population of 9.3 million people. Like Ukraine, Belarus used to be part of the Soviet Union until it broke up in the early 1990s. This history makes Belarus's relationship with Russia quite unique. Putin, acting like someone who can't move on from an ex, wants to bring the old Soviet countries back under Russian control. He's trying to convince them with threats rather than friendly gestures, which is not the best way to win friends. Let's break this down in simpler terms. The situation in Eastern Europe is turning out to be way more dramatic than any reality TV show, with twists and surprises at every turn. It's almost as if the people running Russia are trying to outdo dramatic TV stars with their unexpected moves and sudden changes in loyalty. Basically, it looks like Russia has been using Belarus to help with its goals in Ukraine, planning to weaken Belarus in the process. Once Belarus is weak enough, Russia wants to take it over completely, making it part of Russia without any resistance. It's like they're trying to make one big, happy family, but not in a nice way. This plan isn't just a rumor, there's a leaked document that hints at it, but you can also just look at how things have been going on in the war in Ukraine. Belarus has been Russia's biggest supporter from the start, helping spread Russian messages and giving Russian troops a way to enter Ukraine. Despite this support, Belarus has drawn a line. They've helped Russia but refused to send their own soldiers to fight in Ukraine. This decision by Belarus is very important. When Russian troops went into Ukraine, they did so from Belarus, taking the fastest route to Kiev, Ukraine's capital. This plan could have helped Russia win because of how closely Belarus was working with them. But that didn't happen as expected. What did happen is quite telling. On their way to Kiev, some Russian tanks did something strange and confusing. Instead of flying Russian flags, they were flying the flags of Belarus. This move suggested that Belarusian forces were fighting alongside Russia, a step Belarus wasn't ready to take. This act of flying Belarusian flags was a big clue about Russia's true plans from the start, for those who were paying attention. This situation is really serious. Imagine if Ukraine thought Belarus was attacking them. That would put Belarus in danger of being hit back by Ukraine, leading a lot of harm for Belarusian people. Ukraine would be fighting on two sides, with Belarus taking most of the damage. This would keep Ukraine busy near its capital, while Russia made its moves elsewhere. Russia could then pretend it was winning in Ukraine without losing many of its own soldiers, keeping the war's impact away from Russian eyes. This would make Putin look like a hero back home. Moreover, Russia could use the situation as a chance to take over Belarus, saying it needed to step in to help rebuild the country. That's a frightening thought. There's more evidence suggesting Russia was trying to pull Belarus into a conflict. In March 2022, Ukraine said Russia attacked places in Belarus from Ukrainian territory, hoping to trick Belarus into thinking Ukraine was the attacker. Belarus didn't agree with these accusations, but we have reasons to doubt their denial. By February 2023, it looked like these kinds of sneaky plans were still happening. Ukraine intelligence found Russian military convoys near Belarus dressed like Ukrainian soldiers, possibly planning to attack Belarus and make it look like Ukraine did it. These attacks haven't happened yet, maybe because Ukraine calling out the plan made Russia back off. So why would Russia try to involve Belarus in the war? It's not like Belarus has a huge army that could turn the tide of the war for Russia. Belarus has a good number of soldiers for its size, with 65,000 active and 290,000 in reserves. But compared to Russia's military, with over 1.15 million active and more than 2 million in reserves, Belarus's forces are relatively small. If Russia was just looking for more soldiers, they could easily call up their own without dragging Belarus into the mix. This leads to the big question. Why is Russia so determined to involve Belarus? It all circles back to that revealing document we talked about earlier, which shows Russia's plans to take over the Belarusian government by 2030. This document is a big red flag, showing a strategy for Russia to gradually dominate Belarus until it can completely absorb the country, pretending it's just a union, but actually ending Belarus's independence. This idea is shocking because even though Belarus and Russia are close and share many cultural aspects, it doesn't mean Belarusians want to lose their identity and become part of Russia. Just like Canada and the US have a lot in common but remain distinct nations, Belarus wants to keep its sovereignty. Russia's strategy seems to be first to spread pro-Russian feelings in Belarus, weaken support for Western democracy and Belarusian independence, then tie Belarus's economy to Russia's by aligning their currency and power supplies. This would make Belarus heavily dependent on Russia, making it easier for Russia to take control if they ever tried to resist. Russia also plans to make it easier for Belarusians to get Russian passports, increasing the number of Russians living in Belarus. They want to control the information in Belarus and unify their views on history, essentially rewriting it to make Russia look better. These tactics are concerning because Russia has used similar methods before to take control of areas in Georgia and the Ukraine. The use of passports is particularly alarming as it mirrors the excuses Russia made for invading Ukraine. This plan shows a clear attempt to erase Belarus's independence under the guise of unity, a move that's not only about expanding territory but also about erasing the line between two distinct nations. Russia starts by giving out passports to people in a region to spread its influence. Then they use the presence of these Russian passport holders as a reason to intervene, claiming they need to protect their citizens from alleged persecution. This often happens in areas rich in resources, suggesting the real motive isn't about protecting people, but gaining control of these valuable assets. The big question is whether Russia would actually invade Belarus like it did Ukraine. The leaked document suggests Russia prefers taking over Belarus without using military force, using pressure and coercion instead. Russia aims to control other countries by making them comply with its demands, hoping to annex territories without facing armed conflict, a strategy previously seen in Crimea's annexation. Countries often give in to Russia not out of loyalty, but fear, feeling isolated and vulnerable. Russia might be planning to weaken Belarus by dragging it into a conflict with Ukraine, damaging its military and making annexation easier. This could be why there have been claims of Russia staging attacks to provoke a conflict between Belarus and Ukraine. If Belarus and Ukraine weaken each other, Russia could easily step in, furthering its goal of expanding its territory and influence. Such actions would not only bring Belarus under Russia's control, but also prepare the ground for further expansions into Latvia, Lithuania, and Poland under the guise of Putin's desire to reclaim lost Soviet territories. Despite the seeming madness of this plan, it's consistent with Russia's historical strategies of deception and expansion. Belarus might be aware of Russia's intentions, but feels too intimidated to openly resist, which is likely why they've been cautious about fully committing their military to the conflict. They understand that joining a fight could mean the end of their sovereignty, so they've been trying to avoid it as much as possible. For about a year, there's been a somewhat humorous situation where Russian President Vladimir Putin keeps asking Belarus's President Alexander Lukashenko to send Belarusian troops to Ukraine. Each time, Lukashenko says he needs 3 more weeks, but those weeks pass and nothing changes. This has become a repeated cycle, with Belarus trying to avoid committing to the conflict. The challenge for Belarus is that saying no to Putin isn't really an option in the long run. Many consider Lukashenko's presidency illegitimate, especially after the controversial 2020 election, which many believe he won through fraud. Massive protests erupted, and Western countries no longer recognize Lukashenko as the legitimate president. Lukashenko has stayed in power mainly with Putin's support, including help from Russian forces. Lukashenko is in a tough spot, knowing Putin could withdraw his support at any time, which would likely end his rule, either by Russia's hand or by his own people if Russia pulls back. Meanwhile, the people of Belarus are largely against joining a war. The study by Chatham House found that 79% of Belarusians oppose Belarusian involvement in the war, with a significant portion actually supporting Ukraine. Some Belarusians have even sabotaged their own railways to disrupt Russian supply lines, and a number of Belarusian volunteers are fighting for Ukraine, with a special Belarusian battalion formed to help defend Kiev. This action directly contradicts the false narrative Russia tried to create with tanks bearing Belarusian flags during the attack on Kiev. These Belarusians see their fight alongside Ukraine as a stand for their own independence against Putin's ambitions. Instead of being absorbed into Russia, this situation could mark the start of Belarus gaining freedom from Lukashenko's dictatorship and moving away from Russian influence. It's an example of how Putin's aggressive strategies might be backfiring, undermining his goals and possibly leading to greater independence for Belarus. So, what's your take on the whole situation? Do you think Belarus is really next in line for Russia's expansion plans, or could there be a chance for the country to stand its ground and maintain its independence? With all the twists and turns, it's like watching a live drama unfold. If you've got any insights or opinions, we'd love to hear them down in the comments. Don't forget to check out our other videos for more interesting discussions. Hit that like button, share with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for updates on all the latest content.